Hello! Today's recipe is converting Polygon Fantasy Heroes characters, that's the modular pack from Synty. We're going to convert it into using the textures from Synty Studios' Fantasy Kingdom. So very similar styles, but obviously different textures. And there's a couple of issues with the meshes, which this recipe will hopefully address. Right, so here's our recipe. What we'll do is build the recipe first, and then I'll go through the main steps. Okay, so right, that took about a minute on my machine. Okay, so if we have a quick look at one of these characters. Okay, so what we should see is that these are now using the material from the Polygon Fantasy Kingdom pack. Okay, so how does this recipe work? Okay, so the core part of it is this UV remap, and in effect what it does is it maps features from the source textures into the destination texture. So we have two definition files here, basically texture feature sets, and the mapping here basically will map from a named feature in one into a named feature in the other. It helps if we keep the names similar. In fact, if the names are the same, then our auto-populate method will actually work. Okay, so if we look at these texture feature sets, so if we look at the source here, I'll go to this one. So what these contain is basically named regions within the texture layout. Obviously, that texture layout could cover a number of textures. So you can put these in, fill these in manually, but it's far easier to actually use the Sprite Editor that comes with Unity. So, and then just drop either individual sprites or the entire texture in. So if we have a quick look at that, those textures. Okay, and here's one I've actually done earlier. So if we switch over to the Sprite Editor, so you'll see what I've done is blocked out the major features within this texture. Now you'll see here the chainmail. The actual target texture only has a much smaller area. So what we've done is packaged up into multiple sections, so that can each one of these can then be remapped to the smaller section. Okay, so in terms of knowing which features to map out, you can take two approaches. One is to do everything. Another approach is to use the texture inspector, and this works by we just drop a texture in there. What we can then do is we find our prefabs. So let's look at these characters here, and if we drag and drop those on, okay, so here we can start to see, let me just expand that a bit better, we can start to see the areas that have been used and which features are being used. And we can actually immediately start to see we've got some crossover here. Now, actually these turn out to be, I think, some errors on some meshes, which we will actually sort or fix. And we fix those by applying some features that actually cover the whole set there, or in this case the metal or these colours, and you'll probably see those later. Okay, so in addition to remapping the UVs, we've also applied a couple of fixes to the underlying meshes. So you'll see here we've prefixed a number of instructions with fix. So most of these, well, there's the eyebrows. What these instructions do is basically attach a mesh onto some mesh renderers that were actually missing in those prefabs. There's a head that just has the missing mesh, and this torso is actually offset, so you don't see it if you on the original one, but once you actually start rescaling everything, it becomes noticeable. So these instructions will actually reposition that mesh so that it works along with everything else. Okay, so as I alluded to, we also rescale the models. So if we just go back and have a look at, so if we look here, we see the scale is actually kind of 1, whereas if we look at the originals, let's just drop one of those in there. So there, we see they've actually the scaling was incorrect when they were exported. So I think a lot of their earlier packs had some of those issues, and they've managed to kind of fix those, but not, it seems, with this pack. Anyways, in terms of actually rescaling those, we also had to rebuild the avatar. So if we actually look at one of those characters again, we'll see it. We'll see basically it's using a new rebuilt avatar. Yep. Now, obviously, you don't have to stick with kind of the Fantasy Kingdom pack as your destination. You could quite easily take this example and or take this recipe and apply different texture feature sets. So, for instance, to retarget their adventure pack or the dungeon pack, or or even your own textures. Okay, enjoy.